Cynthia Swanson, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
Yeah, last time we had you on, we were talking about the crime fiction anthology that you edited, Denver Noir, probably
Correct?
a couple years or so ago. And
Yep,
it's good to
two
have,
years ago.
yeah, which was a lot of fun, and I got to participate in as a one of the writers. But now we're really circling around on your own personal um, writing and announcement about your third novel, which is coming up right here around the corner in mid-September, Anyone But Her. And I
Mhm.
know we have a lot to talk about some of your decisions about how you went about publishing it. And I want to get to that, but let's start off with the contents of this novel, which, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say I've read and it is super enjoyable. Okay, go ahead, Cynthia.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. So this is my third novel, Anyone But Her, as Mark mentioned. It's coming out very soon, mid-September. Pub date is September 17th, just 2 weeks from today. We're talking on the 3rd. And I'm very excited to get it out in the world. Anyone But Her is a dual timeline story set in 1979 and 2004 in single narrator. And it's the story of Suzanne, who in 1979 is 14, and her mother, Alex, has been murdered 6 months earlier. Alex owns a record store on Colfax Avenue in Denver, and she is killed during an armed robbery of the record store. And about 6 months after that happens, she appears to Suzanne as a ghost. Suzanne's clairvoyant and has been seeing ghosts since she was small, and Alex knows this, and shows up as a ghost. And she wants Suzanne to intervene in the relationship between Suzanne's father, James, and his new girlfriend, Peggy, who the ghost Alex has great concerns about, as somebody who could potentially take her place in the family. And Suzanne, who's very close with her mother, heeds these warnings, and there are some pretty severe repercussions that happen in the 1979 timeline. In 2004, it's 25 years later, and Suzanne is an adult. She's moved away from Denver long ago after graduating high school and moves back reluctantly with her husband and children. She has a 14-year-old daughter who's a bit of a handful, and a 9-year-old son who has unspecified cognitive difficulties that she's very concerned about as well. And she gets the opportunity to rent the old Zoe's record space, which was the name of the record store on Colfax, and turn it into sort of a art gallery consignment shop for female artists. And so she does that, and that is a wonderful accomplishment for her. But at the same time, those ghosts of the past keep coming up, and there's somebody following her. She's sure of it. There's her instincts and her intuition and her clairvoyance are telling her that things are still quite off. And so what has somewhat been resolved in 1979 is not exactly resolved and comes up again in 2004.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. If you could pick up the book again, just show us the cover because you can see that record in the background.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really a slick design. What how did you go about picking your years? I mean, you've got a lot of choices when you start off with a dual timeline. How did you go about picking your years?
Yeah, it was interesting, Mark, because the first time I wrote the book, the very first version of it, I only had the 1979 timeline. And so I wrote that book, and I was very happy with it, had a few beta readers. They thought it was great. And I gave it to my agent to take a look at. And she said, I like a lot of things about this, but this is not an adult book. This is YA. And she said, there may be some things you might need to change in here to make it really work as YA, but I don't see it working as adult. And I was a little crushed, because I love YA, but it's not what I want to write. And I didn't envision the book that way. I envisioned it, even though the character was 14 years old, of being, somebody looking back at this experience at that age in 1979, which coincidentally is about the age I was around then. So the era, that particular era, with the music and 70s music and Denver in the 1970s, was just something that I really wanted to write. So picking that timeline was pretty easy. Um, Fast forward a couple full versions through of it. I did go through a couple of other iterations and ways to try to make the book more adult. And what I eventually landed on was the dual timeline. And I didn't want adult Suzanne to be, if I had moved it to present day, adult Suzanne would be, looking at turning 60. And I wanted her to be going through the things that were more of the things that you're going through in for most of us in middle age, of raising children, of kind of figuring out your career and if it's really working, and if not, where you might want to pivot, the things that are happening more when you're around in your late 30s or into your 40s. So that really it kind of ended up being like, 2004 would not have been my ideal year. It's not like the most exciting things in the world are happening in 2004, but for her timeline and for her purposes, it worked. And there were a few kind of interesting things I could pull in. It happens during election season, and it was a very different election season than this year, but it sort of comes up. So there were certainly some pieces of 2004 that I was able to pull in, and some music from that era as well. So
Yeah. You also gave her an unusual hobby.
mhm.
Care to talk about that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, Suzanne's hobby is that she likes to refurbish old knives and make new handles for them and make them beautiful. So, and this is a hobby that she picks up um, when she's 14, 15, actually, by the time that timeline ends. And it is directly because of some of the things that happened in 1979, which I can't give away. You have to read, but it is certainly something that she picks up for reasons and does throughout. And as an adult, she still doesn't leave her house without carrying around at least some kind of a small pocket knife that she's rehandled and she's made. And the knives do come up as a concern in 2004. Is this really the thing that she should be doing? She has a 14-year-old daughter herself. Would she be encouraging her 14-year-old daughter to be walking around carrying a knife? But it was fun to learn about. And actually, it was interesting because I wanted her to have some sort of an interesting hobby. And I went to Facebook where we go for these things. And I went to, I think it was Reader's Coffee House, one of those, large reader groups. And I asked people, I'm looking kind of hive mind is, what would be a fun hobby for you to read about somebody doing? And somebody suggested that. And I thought, ooh, that's kind of cool. And I actually have a neighbor who does that as his hobby. So I asked him if he'd give me a little, tour of his workshop and what he does, and he did. And so that was how I was able to kind of learn more about that hobby and how that's done. He makes beautiful knives himself, so I would love to have one. I really love them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it makes a very memorable character if you
Mhm,
give her
mhm.
an unusual hobby, at least for a woman,
Right,
at least in my
right,
mind. Yeah.
right.
Was there some moment of inspiration for this whole book? Something that really you can tie it back to one specific day where this sort of thing just fell into your head?
Parts of it did. I mean, the idea of this ghost mom um that wanted to come back and ask for help from her teenage daughter, that just hit me one day. And in those earlier versions, actually in that very first version where she where I just had the um 1979 timeline, it was a larger family and she was just one of the children in the family. And as I added another timeline, I realized that I had to streamline a lot of things about 1979. And so that was one of the things that I did. I had to I kind of always wanted to write about a big family, and I still would like to do that. But it ended up being that this, and I thought that would really play well in this book, that like all the rest of the siblings are like, you're kind of crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom's gone, you know, but it ended up not working that way because with putting in that other timeline, I had to streamline out a lot of other things. So she went from having three other siblings to just having one. She has a younger brother named Chris, and a lot of the reason that Alex asks Suzanne to intervene is that Alex is very concerned about Chris, about her 6-year-old son, and the um, the effect that the girlfriend might have on him if she becomes part of the family.
So you've already mentioned your agent's reaction to the solo timeline, the 1979 story. Did you then show the dual timeline version to your agent as well?
I did. And this, by the time we got to that point, before I did that, actually, like I said, I went through a couple other possible ideas and ways to do it, none of which she liked. And so then I went back and got some more um, beta readers and talked to them about it and got some other thoughts and some other ideas. And then I did something I don't normally do. I wrote a synopsis. I kind of put together this idea and put it in front of my agent, and I said, I'm going to write a synopsis of this, which I and give you that whole thing, and you tell me if this is the book you want me to write. And so we went back and forth on that a little bit, and I did that, and we got where she was happy with it and I was happy with it, and then I wrote that book. And we pitched that book. She took that out summer 22, right after Denver Noir came out. And we were getting a lot of no's on that. Very nice no's, but a lot of no's. Kind of backing up on my publishing journey. I was traditionally published by Harper for my first book, and The Glass
Oh,
Forest was published by Simon and Schuster. So yeah, Bookseller was Harper, and Glass Forest was Simon and Schuster Gallery. But both of those, my editor left Harper, she retired, and we went to Simon and Schuster, Touchstone, and then Touchstone 8 months after The Glass Forest came out is when they imploded and closed their doors. So I was orphaned. So that's why I ended up having to go out and look for a new publisher again. But we weren't getting really anywhere with that. And I almost thought I was just going to, self-publish at that point. And I went to BoucherCon. And I think I saw you at that BoucherCon. It was in Minneapolis. And I was having coffee with a friend of mine, a writer friend of mine, Kate Moretti. And I was telling her about the book. And Kate said, she said, okay, that all sounds good, but who's the villain in that 2004 timeline? And I said, well, she's like, she's worried the business isn't going to work out. She's worried about her kid. She thinks her husband might be having an affair. And Kate said, okay, but who's the villain? And I was like, you're right. There is not an actual, can we wrap our head around it, even though we don't know necessarily who it is, villain in that second timeline. And so I went back to my agent and I said, I need to rewrite this again. I think this is what's missing from this book. And so I did that, and it became much stronger, and I was much happier with that version of it. But unfortunately, she was never able to really work up her enthusiasm for it the way that I was. And so we ended up parting ways. And in the meantime, I felt like I had this killer, literally, book, that I was really happy with. And so I asked around and got some recommendations and ended up with a new agent. So I signed with Jill Marshall and at Marshall Alliance, and she's my agent now. And she took the book out last summer on sub, the new version of it. She loved it. And again, we were getting passes, but a lot of the reason was because she couldn't go back to anybody that my previous agent had gone to. This is sort of one of those little things that they don't tell you, but once you've had one version out, I mean, that's it. You get a single shot unless somebody
yeah,
said, please rewrite this and resubmit it, which rarely happens. There's just too many books out there.
right.
Too many manuscripts coming across their desks. So we were a little limited in who she could go to. And she tried, she really did. And she would have gone to some smaller presses. But I kind of got to a point where I said, you know what? I think I'm ready to do this on my own. And so the first thing I did when I made that decision was I went back to my developmental editor for the bookseller from way back, 10, 12 years ago. And I hired her to read it and said, can you just tell me, like, is this publishable? Is there something really wrong with this book? And so she read it and she really liked it a lot. And she had some very good feedback. But one of the things that she said was, I don't know about that ghost. She said, is she really a ghost? Is she a guy? I'm not really, I can't really tell. Is she a ghost or is she not a ghost? And it made me realize I'd been really wishy-washy about that. And I had not really leaned into the ghost aspect of the story. I'd been sort of afraid to do that. And I had to either take it out or really make it, that's what was going on and say, no, this is a ghost story. And so that's when I decided that make Suzanne clairvoyant and really kind of lean into that aspect of it. It ended up such a stronger book because of that. And that was pretty recently. That was like January this year that I did that. I had a couple friends of mine who are mediums read it, and they gave me incredible feedback about what that experience would be like for somebody who's clairvoyant. Um, and in the meantime, I started this self-publishing journey and I started learning everything that I could about publishing the book on my own. And the biggest commitment I made was that I had a set budget that I was going to stick to, but I wanted to publish a book that was every bit as high quality as my traditionally published books. So, and that meant making sure that I was working with good editors, working with the developmental editor that I did, working with a good copywriter, working with a phenomenal cover designer, and just making sure I had those pieces in place to give the book everything that the publishers had been able to give me when I did traditionally published books. So that, and gosh, it's been, oh, Mark, it's been such a journey and such a learning experience. It's, as
Yeah.
anybody who has independently published can tell you, it's a lot of work. I mean, there's so many pieces and things will go well. And then there'll be some glitch that you had no idea would even be a glitch until it happens. And all of a sudden you're kind of stuck again and you start over. And I've learned a lot. It's been an education.
Yeah. There, if you set a high standard in you, which you did, especially in terms of developmental editing, copy editing, and just keeping it all kind of screwed down tight through all these processes.
Yeah.
I think it's both scary because you feel like it could just slip and something is going to shift and you're not going to catch it. Um, but it's also very rewarding because they are your standards. You get to decide.
Mhm.
I assume in previous with the Glass Forest and the bookseller, you had consultation on the cover, maybe, but you wasn't in your final say. And I don't even know, maybe those titles weren't your own. But
Neither of those were my own. Yeah, and I ultimately liked them a lot, but neither of them were the titles that I started with. Yeah, and that's very common. And it's actually
yeah,
interesting because when my first agent took Anyone But Her out, that had been the title that I'd had for a long time. And I really liked it. And she didn't. And she took it out with a different title that we came up with together. Because and reason she didn't like it was because she felt like it read too much like a thriller, and it was sort of that in between, is it upmarket fiction or is it thriller? And she said, I think you're trying to make it a thriller, but it's really not. And then I went and added that villain situation in 2004, and it really did completely become a thriller, become psychological suspense. And so when I decided to look for a new agent and go out again with it, I went back to the title that I'd loved the whole time, which is Anyone But Her, which is something that the character, the ghost, says at the end of chapter one. She said, when she met Peggy, the girlfriend, Peggy James's girlfriend, Suzanne's father, James, and Peggy, his girlfriend, went to high school together, and they dated back then. And so Alex met this woman at their high school reunion, and on the way home from the high school reunion, she jokingly said to him, "You know what? If I ever die, you can marry anybody but her." And she was joking around, and then of course she dies, and he starts dating her. So that's where the title comes from. Um, but yeah, it's kind of, it was very satisfying to say, no, I get to pick my title this time instead of somebody else saying, "Oh, that's going to market very well, whatever." So
yeah,
yeah, I'm
yeah,
I'm kind of excited to have been able to do that, and I like how it came out. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've been around and we're friends through Denver Noir and other things, and I've been around your process on this particular title and getting it out there. I've been around enough to know that you really set a long lead time in terms of your publication date, and because you knew all the steps that were going to be involved.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that was still enough time or if you felt pressured because I think a lot of folks think that you've got finished a novel and now you can jump online and get your account and put it through some automatic formatting thing and maybe crowdsource a cover and you can be published in 3 or 4 weeks. But to do it the way you did it, developmental editing, copy editing, you
Mhm.
probably sent for proof copies and checked those and made
Absolutely.
changes. Um, this takes months and months.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it really does. It's so from the time that I decided to do it, it was like January, and here we are, September. So, and I did have a pretty firm cutoff that if I couldn't get it done by mid-September, I would probably wait. I think this fall, especially with the election and everything going on, it's not going to be a great time to be publishing fiction for a while now. So actually, it's one of the things that's kind of funny though, is like, I mean, the character you asked about the character's age and the time, and her birth date is October 1964, which also is the same birth year as our one of our presidential candidates. And so I kind of feel like, like that whole Gen X, Gen Jones is sort of having a moment right now, and that was not at all planned. But it's actually kind of worked out to my advantage, I think, right now. I think it will. We'll see, because people of my generation are excited about a lot of what's going on right now, and about the fact that like we're finally getting noticed. And this character is right a part of that generation. So that was sort of fun. But yeah, getting back to the publishing question of it, I knew that I needed, if I couldn't get it done by this time, then I would just have to put it off and not do it until next spring at the earliest. And so yeah, I did kind of start working back through dates, and I did a lot of research. I went to a lot of online conferences and podcasts and things like that about self-publishing, and kind of followed a lot of different groups online that talk about it. I lurk in those groups. I'm not posting them because I don't have anything to add right now. But and asked. I also asked people that I know that you know. I mean, one of them being Amy Rivers, who's local Colorado author and is very successfully self-published. And so I asked her if I could buy her lunch and talk to her about it, and we did that, and she was wonderful. She gave me a lot of good advice. Also, Helen Starbuck, who's a member of Sisters in Crime Colorado, and who also self-publishes. Same thing. I had coffee with her, and she's actually the one who connected me with my cover designer. So it's, just being able to talk to other people about their process and what they did and what they wish they would have done differently, and get some advice was really helpful. I think in
Yeah.
anytime you're going to do something like this, it's always good to try to seek out as much feedback as you can and advice, and know what you're getting into.
Yep. Yep, for sure. And then laying out the marketing plan and tackling
Mhm.
all that as well. It's all on you.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, with that, because of being traditionally published for the last almost 10 years, that certainly gave me a leg up on that. I know a good number of people in the media, especially locally. I know a lot of librarians locally. I have events set up at
Mhm.
Arapahoe and Douglas County and Denver Public Library, because I know the librarians and I've done events with them before, the coordinators. So being able to have those kinds of connections. Same thing with bookstores. I mean, I have a couple of bookstore events set up, and that's because I know people, and that one of the things that I decided about my marketing and my promotion was that I was really going to focus on Denver. It's very much a Denver story, and as much as I could do organically through my connections here, that's what I've been doing. Will I get to the point where I'll do some paid advertising? Probably, but it's not been the big thing that I want to be spending my budget on right now. I wanted to spend my budget on putting together a quality book. And I would rather, spend less to advertise a quality book than spend all my money on advertising a book that was not ready to be out there in the world. And that's kind of the
Yep.
philosophy that I took.
Yep. Did you send it off to any of the pre-publication review sites?
I did, yeah. So that was one of the other things that I was willing to spend a little bit of money on. I sent it to Book Life, which is part of Publishers Weekly, and they did a really nice review on it. And I sent it to Midwest Book Review, and they did a lovely review as well. So, and then I've had a couple other reviews that have come in that are just like through media that are local here.
Great.
But I do think
Wow.
that those can be worth it. And I also put it on NetGalley, and you can do NetGalley through a co-op, which keeps the price down for NetGalley, and that definitely made that a lot easier. But that's allowed me to get a lot of reader reviewers
Ah,
that have put in some really nice reviews on Goodreads and places like that.
oh, great.
Yeah,
Excellent. Excellent.
yeah.
That's a good tip. I didn't know about that. That's great.
The other one too that has kind of surprised me is I'm running a giveaway right now. Well, and everybody should know this because they got to. But by the time this posts, it'll probably be over. It's over on the 5th. But a Goodreads giveaway costs you $120, which is not that much. And it bumped me up from maybe about 100 people had the book listed as to read to now almost 5,000. So that has been, I mean, if even some of those translate into people not winning the giveaway, but going out and getting a copy of the book, well worth it. Well worth spending that $120. So I thought that one surprised me. I did not realize it
Yeah.
would bump it up that much, but it really did make a big difference. So it's given it
Is
some
that
good visibility.
is that ebook giveaway or is
Print. I'm
um
doing print.
that physical book giving?
I'm doing print. You can do either. You can do it
Yeah.
either way that you want, but I chose to do print. So there's that, I mean, I had to get some ARCs printed. I've had to, there's some shipping costs involved in that. There's running over to my post office. So a lot of pieces that I was not necessarily doing when you have a publisher who's going to do that stuff for you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but depending on your publisher, and this is something I think that people don't know too, but especially if you're with a smaller press, you might not necessarily be paying for those pieces up front, but they could be taking those off your advance. A lot of times they do. They're like, that's an expense and that counts against. So you really are paying for it one way or the other, unless you're with a big publisher. It's just it's just the way the business works.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Really good. Can I just ask you generally, I mean, if you can think back to when you made that decision to go and publish this yourself, can you look back on that decision and say for sure you made the right move, without question, or it seems like kind of that was just sort of an organic thought process as you encountered the kind of reaction you were getting.
Yeah, I can say that I made the right decision. And one of the reasons I can say that is because when I decided to do it, again, as I mentioned, I had a set budget and I said, this is the budget I'm going to stick to. And I have to be willing to accept that I won't make that money back, but I will at least know that I tried. And that is obviously not something that everybody can do. And I'm fortunate that I'm able to do that and that I was able to say, I'm willing to invest that amount of money, just like you would in any business. You start a business and you're like, okay, you obviously want to make your money back from your investment, your initial investment, and then you want to start making a profit. It doesn't always work. But if you don't know, you don't try. Or if you don't try, you don't know. And I just wasn't willing to let it be something that I had to be wondering about forever. And I've shelved books in the past. I've shelved published or fully print ready to go. I thought ready to go books that actually were probably not. And I'm sure I'll do that in the future. But I've always felt and trusted in my gut that this story was meant to be out there and the story was ready to be out there. So I wouldn't do this for every book. I wouldn't recommend to anybody that they do that for every book just because they want to, unless you're willing to just, lose your money. Um, you have to really just know instinctually that this is the right move to make. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And I have a hunch you've got something else in the works for your agent and or at least working on another project
mhm,
and thinking, you'll be back with something
mhm,
for
mhm.
mainstream consumption very soon.
Yeah, I will. And actually that reminded me of another piece when you mentioned my agent again. My agent did sell the audio for this book to Tantor
Oh,
Media. So it is coming out in audio, which is great because I would have done audio on my own if I had to, but it's one less thing to have to do. So the audio is coming out, I think, in November, a little bit past the publication date for print and ebook, but it will be available in audio for any audiobook readers. And that was a deal that she put together, which was great. But yes, I am working on something else. It's a mystery set in Colorado, partly in Denver and partly in a fictional mountain town in 1938. And one of the big things in Anyone But Her is the house that the family lives in. They live in a Queen Anne Victorian built in 1888 in Cap Hill, and that house comes up in the book I'm working on now too, which was kind of fun. So
yeah, nice,
that
nice,
house has
nice.
a history, and so that we may be seeing that house come up as a character more than once.
That's great. I love that. That's
Yeah.
cool. So, and just real quickly, I know you're going to be at Colorado Gold. Are you teaching?
Yeah, I'm teaching a class called Keeping It Real, How Much Fiction Belongs in Historical Fiction. So we'll be talking about, where does it make sense to be historically accurate and where does it make sense to take a little bit of poetic license and how do you find that balance? I think it will be an interesting session. And I'm doing a
Yeah.
birds of a feather for historical fiction writers as well.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Birds of a Feather is just a meeting of like minds, but people who write in generally the same genre.
Mhm.
But you'll be leading that discussion, I guess.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Great.
yep. Bright and early at
Excellent.
8 a.m. on Saturday morning. That's an early one. Bring your coffee. So-
I've got an 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, so I feel you.
yeah, we'll wave at each
Um,
other as we go by.
yeah. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, we always like to shed light on another book or another writer, pay it forward a little bit. Now's your
Mhm.
chance.
I am reading right now The Royal Game by Linda Kerr, which is Linda Hull and
Kiergraf.
Kiergraf,
Kiergraf.
yeah, I was going to say, I almost said Grant, but it's Kiergraf. Kiergraf, that who are a writing partner, writing duo, and it's so much fun. It's about a fictional British royal family, and through the viewpoint of the fiance of the king to be, and it's really, and she's American, and what she goes through to possibly become part of this family. I'm about maybe two-thirds done with it, but I'm completely enjoying it. It's a lot of fun to read, and they're
Yeah.
wonderful. They're great writers and a great team.
The book holds up all the way through. I'm here to tell you, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And pretty easy to see the Harry Meghan thing going on for
totally.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Well, Cynthia, good luck with the launch of Anyone But Her. Thank you for this rundown today. See you at Colorado Gold and catch
I'm
up
going
with
to
you
tell
down the
people
road.
if they come, they will also get and visit me at Colorado Gold. You will get a Find Zoe's Records key ring, which is also plays part in the story. So I had some made up.
Oh, I need
So come
one.
and visit me if you're a Colorado Gold and hopefully
I
pick
need
up a copy of Anyone But Her.
put my name on one of those.
Got it.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. Thanks, Mark. It's been great. Take care. Bye.